Welcome back to the channel, PM Nightly. We're going to watch a video today called The Real Story Behind Spider-Man. When I was a kid and I used to actually read the comics, he was actually my favorite. So, I'm going to jump right in. And this is from a channel called Today I Found Out. They cover a lot of different subjects. So, check them out. All right, so here we go.
According to an anecdote told by Stan Lee in virtually every interview he's ever given about Spider-Man, the genesis of the hero began when he saw an insect crawling up a wall while brainstorming ideas and figured that a hero who could stick to walls would be kind of cool. In reality, though, the origins of everyone's favourite friendly neighbourhood Spider-Man is a little less cut and dry. For starters, Stan Lee himself admitted in his own autobiography, Excelsior, The Amazing Life of Stan Lee, that the seeing an insect crawl up a wall story is one that he's told so often to so many people that he can't really remember if it's true or something he came up with, as it made a pretty good story to tell the public. This explains why the story, as consistently as Lee has tried to tell it over the years, has slight variations depending on when and to whom it was being told. For example, in some versions, Lee saw the insect, usually a fly, while he sat in his office in 1962, and in others he saw it while literally pitching the hero to his boss, and in others it was something he remembered as being cool.
My cat's making some
years
noise
earlier.
here.
When asked about why he came up with such an obscure power for a hero, in another case Lee explained that the decision was made partly out of frustration, that he thought that he'd pretty much done everything else at that point. In his own words, the big thing with superheroes is you have to try to do something different. I thought, what superpower could I give him? I already had done somebody who was very strong. I did a woman who could turn invisible. I did a guy who could fly. I was thinking, what's left?
Yeah, what do you
The heroes
come up with?
referenced by Lee in that quote for non-comic fans who inexplicably decided to view this video are the Incredible Hulk, the Invisible Woman, and the Human Torch. The latter two heroes are best known for being founding members of Marvel's first family, the Fantastic Four, co-created by Lee and first introduced in 1961, while the former was introduced in May of 1962 and was also co-created by Lee. Again, according to another popular anecdote by Lee, before settling on Spider-Man, Lee came up with and rejected several other insect-themed names, including Gnat Man, Insect Man, and Mosquito Man. Again, this story has been told so many times that there exist multiple variations, but they all...
Could you imagine a mosquito man and what that costume would look like? I mean, maybe as a villain that he like attacks people and sticks something into their neck or whatever and sucks their blood out, whatever. But as a comic book hero, yeah, I don't think so. Hello, baby boy. Okay. All right, let's go on.
all say essentially the same thing. That Lee came up with the name Spider-Man while brainstorming and felt that it just fit, which isn't really the whole story either. You see, Lee also stated that he was a huge fan of the Spider, a fictional character hailing from the pulp magazines of the 1930s, and that this character directly influenced the creation of Spider-Man. In the vein of similar pulp heroes like The Shadow and the Green Hornet, the Spider was a wealthy man who adopted an alter ego to wage a one-man war on crime, often brutally killing criminals and branding their corpses with a spider-shaped mark to serve as a warning to others, hence the name the Spider. Save for the use of the spider imagery, the Spider and Spider-Man share virtually nothing else in common, making it fairly obvious that the only facet of the Spider-Man character the Spider influenced was his name. That said, according to Lee, he came up with the name Spider-Man independently, but was convinced that it was the right name when he recalled the name of the Spider's comic, The Spider, Master of Men, and how dramatic it found it as a child. As a slight tangent, Spider-Man co-creator Steve Ditko claims that Lee was a big fan of the DC hero Hawkman, and has mentioned that he feels that this likely influenced the name Spider-Man in some way. Whatever the case, although Lee liked the name, his publisher, to whom he had to pitch the character, Martin Goodman, hated it, reportedly telling him people hate spiders. Another aspect of the character Goodman took issue with was Lee's insistence that he be a teenager, reportedly telling Lee that teenagers can only be sidekicks. Lee took particular exception to this, as he felt a younger comic character would ultimately be more relatable to teenagers, a rapidly expanding audience for the medium at the time.
And also, the reality is when they have these rich people who become superheroes like Batman and what have you, I mean, historically, in reality, rich people aren't going to do anything for us. They have no interest in keeping us safe or anything else. It makes a lot more sense to have an idealistic teenager or, college student, someone in their early 20s that would become, get this power and then fight for people, fight criminals or whoever it is they're fighting. That makes more sense than a rich person coming upon a power and then saying, oh, I'm going to do good for humanity, because they're not doing good for humanity before they got the superpower. Probably. It's not true in every circumstance, I'm sure, but nonetheless, I think it makes it more believable.
On a side note, Lee made the conscious decision to buck the trend of referring to a teenage superhero with the suffix boy, opting to call his hero Spider-Man to show that he was just as capable as any other hero. He also claimed that Goodman disagreed with him about the idea of Spider-Man struggling with typical teenage issues like girls, homework, and bullies alongside being a hero, telling him he can't have personal problems if he's supposed to be a superhero. Don't you know who a superhero is? Again, Lee felt that a hero with personal problems and vulnerabilities would make for a more interesting and ultimately more relatable character for young fans, and he refused to back down. Goodman eventually relented and gave Lee permission to write a story for the character that was to be published in an issue of a comic series produced by Marvel called Amazing Adult Fantasy, which in modern times with the internet having ruined us all would definitely not feature a teenage superhero. In any event, as it turns out, the only reason Goodman agreed to let Lee put Spider-Man into the comic was because it was quite literally on the verge of being canned, with the issue featuring Spider-Man slated to be his last. Undeterred, Lee, with the help of artist Steve Ditko, fleshed out the concept and design of the character. Exactly how much influence Ditko had on the design and backstory of Spider-Man has been the subject of much controversy and debate over the years. That said, it's largely agreed that Ditko came up with most every aspect of Spider-Man's costume, including the bold for the time decision to have him wear a mask that covered his entire face. Ditko, in an extended essay about his involvement with the creation of Spider-Man, explained that he did this to cover Spider-Man's obviously boyish face and add a layer of mystery to the character. The decision has been widely lauded as brilliant for helping define the character, as well as making it easier for children of all ethnicities and backgrounds to relate to the superhero. In addition to this, Ditko is also said to have expanded upon Lee's original idea of a teenager getting bitten by a spider, though to what extent is not clear. We do know that before it was decided that Spider-Man's powers were apparently going to be caused by the bite of a radioactive spider, it was Lee's idea to have him get his powers from a magic ring, an idea that was quickly dropped, according to Ditko, because of how similar the idea was to how the powers for the Archie comics hero, the Fly, worked. Said idea was apparently partially pitched by another famed comic artist called Jack Kirby, who himself has claimed to have had some input in Spider-Man's creation. Again, how much influence Kirby had on the character and the backstory is not clear, though Ditko has said that Kirby's involvement was limited to 5 unused pencil pages of an unfinished story. That said, these 5 pages did contain elements that did eventually become a part of Spider-Man canon. For example, details such as his real name, Peter Parker, and the fact that he lived with his aunt and uncle. Kirby also drafted a version of Spider-Man's costume that was immediately rejected by Lee because it was essentially identical to the one worn by Captain America at the time. In the end, Kirby's involvement with Spider-Man's debut was limited to the cover, which was coloured by Ditko. Although, as mentioned, the character of Spider-Man was essentially being sent to die in a failing comic book that was slated to be canned after the issue he appeared in, the story was written as if the series was set to continue, with the final pages of the comic noting that the Spider-Man will continue to appear every month. On top of this, for Spider-Man's debut, the comic's title was changed from Amazing Adult Fantasy to simply Amazing Fantasy, to double down on Lee's assertion that the character would resonate with a younger audience, and we can only assume helped further solidify the fact that his web shooter was totally family-friendly. And Lee was right, because although Amazing Fantasy was cancelled, when Marvel looked at sales figures a few months after its August 1962 release, they realised that the issue had sold more copies than nearly any other comic they'd ever released up to that point. With the popularity of the character now apparent, Marvel began arranging for Spider-Man to get his own series, which began publication in March the following year, starting with The Amazing Spider-Man #1. Today, Spidey is one of Marvel's most profitable and recognisable heroes, being consistently ranked alongside the likes of Superman and Batman as one of the best fictional characters ever created. Which isn't bad for a character nobody thought would be popular, originally debuting in a comic that was slated to hit the dustbin of history directly after publication. Bonus facts. An often overlooked aspect of Spider-Man's name, unless you're a real stickler for grammar, is that unlike virtually every other superhero, his name contains a hyphen being written as Spider-Man in
True.
most official media since his first appearance in 1962. According to Lee, this was to differentiate Spider-Man from Superman when the comic was on newsstands. To ensure that the names were as different as possible from the very beginning, Lee even insisted that Spider-Man's name be written across 2 lines of the cover of Amazing Fantasy number 15, the comic featuring his first appearance. And now for another bonus fact. The line, "with great power comes great responsibility," was first featured in a side panel of Spider-Man's first story and wasn't originally actually uttered or spoken by any character. So I really hope you found today's video interesting. If you did, please do hit that thumbs up button below. Don't forget to subscribe.
Okay, so that was interesting. I have to honestly admit, when he was first saying the quote from Stan Lee that he had already created a superhero that could fly and a superhero that was strong, Superman actually jumped into my head. And then I had to say, oh, wait a minute, that's DC. So thank goodness I didn't say that aloud at that time. I'd probably have some Marvel fans a little put out. But I am aware Superman is a DC comic. But yes, like I said, Spider-Man was my favorite as a kid. I also read Superboy comics, Iron Man. I used to like that a lot. So interesting to know that they originally thought that it should have been like an older man. And I think that, Stan Lee and the Marvel comics kind of they've expanded on that idea of like the backstory where they have real problems, and a lot of the characters are like that, where they have relationship issues or whatever. Now, I have to say that for me, I had hit a point reading the Spider-Man comics where I began to get a bit annoyed with him because I felt like he just whined too much. He was just getting on my nerves, and maybe that's because I was getting older, and I was older teenage years, very early 20s, and I just wasn't reading them anymore. But I did enjoy them for a time while I was young. Well, anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. Check out the Today I Found Out channel. They have a lot of different subjects. He also, this man, Simon Whistler, he's the one doing the narration. He has a number of different channels, and they're all equally interesting. So I thank you for coming to visit my channel and spend some time with me. I hope you enjoyed the show, and I hope I'll see you again on another video. So thank you. Have a great day.